right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of React Wednesdays. We've got a pretty fun one here today. Let me actually toss up the name here. We're talking React Native in dual screen devices, which should be pretty fun. So with me today on our panel, I've got Dan Wilson.
Hey, I'm Dan Wilson. I work with Digital Primates. We do enterprise React consulting, and we curate the enterprise React newsletter. So if that's your thing, sign up. We'll never spam nor sell your email.
We've got Jalen Macy.
Yep, I'm Jalen Massey. I'm a software developer at.
Screwed it up already.
No worries, so close. I'm a software developer at Digital Primates.
And Obed Parlapiano.
Nice.
I think I got it.
Yeah, Parlapiano. Yeah, almost there. Yeah, I'm a software engineer, mostly front end at Hitch.
And then our special guest for today from Microsoft, we've got Kyle Aloia.
Yeah, so okay. I'm Kyle Aloia. I work over at the DSX team at Microsoft, and we just make a plethora of apps for multiple devices. In this case, the new Duo.
And Craig Dunn.
Hey, yeah, my name's Craig Dunn. I work at Microsoft on the Surface Duo developer experience team. And my focus is really enabling cross-platform apps, to come to the Surface Duo and take advantage of the two screens.
Awesome. So maybe Kyle or Craig, maybe one of you could help set the stage here today. So we're talking about dual screen devices, the Duo. Why don't you give, if someone hasn't heard of any of this before, what is the device? What does it do? What are some of the development challenges you're trying to help tackle for people building for this thing?
Yeah, so I can start with that. To start with, this is a Surface Duo. I can't show you it working, but I can show you that it is incredibly thin. It folds all the way around. So you can take a call, you can read a book, and you can have a tablet. So it's a really nice device to hold. I guess to your question, one of the development challenges is, what do you do as a developer with two screens? So there's a couple of important aspects to know about the device. The first one is, despite the Microsoft logo on the front, it runs Android. So the entire Google Play store is at your fingertips. You can install Android apps on the device. And of course, that opens the door for React Native developers to target the Surface Duo. The apps that you get off the Google Play Store, for all intents and purposes, see the device as a regular Android phone. So it can have one screen, and the apps will load, they'll run. So all of your React Native apps that you've built today, they're going to work fine on the Surface Duo. The challenge and the opportunity for React Native developers and for developers in general with the device is that in addition to just running your app on a single screen, you have the opportunity to take advantage of the fact that it can be on both screens. So there's all of this extra screen real estate where you can take whatever task your customer is working on and blow it up to two screens. Or you can let them to do two things side by side. So your app may have the ability to do internal multitasking. You've got a list view and a detail view, for example. Or you can just have your app sitting on one screen and intelligently multitasking with other apps that your user is using. So having a mail app side by side with a calendar app is a great way to check your schedule as you're responding to someone. Or having a book open on one side and a note-taking app on the other because you're studying and you want to take notes as you read. So there's all sorts of interesting opportunities for multitasking within an app and multitasking across apps. With the device in two-screen mode. So I guess, it might make a little bit more sense. Kyle has a demo that he can show. We have an emulator. So any React Native devs out there that want to start playing with this, the emulator is available. It's free. Go to docs.microsoft.com/dual-screen. And you can get started with React Native today, get your Android apps, deploy them to the emulator and start playing with what it would feel like to have that app on two screens.
One question that came to mind is you said that React Native apps will automatically work. What is the experience for a non-optimized React Native app on the Surface Duo?
So the experience is, very much like an Android device. It has a very kind of wide form factor. So there's a lot of room, even when the app is just open on one screen. There's a lot of room for display, for photos, for video, in kind of either orientation. The app always starts on a single screen. So when you're opening the device and you click an icon, the app always starts, on one side or the other, wherever you click the icon. So by default, it's a very natural experience. The customers aren't going to get surprised. If your user decides to span over 2 screens, it literally, assuming your app is resizable and has a responsive layout, it's just going to take up all the space. So the experience is kind of what you would expect. And the challenge is, there's all of that extra space. What do you do with it? And there's a area in the middle where the hinge is that's obscured from the customer. So you might want to adjust your layouts to kind of shift your UI elements so that they kind of move to the left or right of the hinge.
So would it act like a tablet app?
If you've got your your layout qualifiers set, on the single screen it will not. And if your smallest width is set correctly on the widescreen, I think it will. But it's not going to be as tall as a tablet, obviously. It's kind of like a letterboxed tablet.
Why don't we jump into the demo? Because I have a lot of other questions, but I think I kind of want to just see this thing in action and see what this looks like.
Yeah.
Sure. So cool. So yeah, we're sharing. So basically what we have here is just a quick little example app from one of the libraries we made called 2-pane navigation. And as you can see, we kind of have our single screen mode here, right? And if you go through it, it's just a very simple pizza app, right? Click on some photos, you go to view menu, you can check out, right? And so this is kind of what it would be like in a normal single screen process, right? And so if you're making a normal application, you really only have to worry about this one screen. But when you're making now on multi-screen devices, we really want to show off that you can do just a whole lot more. So what you will see here is when we go from single screen to a dual screen mode here.
So as a user, what did you just do there? Did you like drag the app into the middle, or so like on a physical device, you would like what is the user doing there?
Yeah, so on a physical device, you would essentially be dragging this little toolbar here into the middle, and then that would expand it.
Okay.
If you want, you can move left screen, right screen. And so it's just kind of about how you want to lay it out. And then as you can see here, if we went from kind of our single screen application, right, to now we have everything on our right screen, as well as nothing, nothing refreshes or reloads. It's very much what you just had before. And you can still go back just like you would normally. And so there's kind of, yeah.
If the app did not support this sort of dual screen nature, what would happen? Would you get like a little like disabled
like
sound
a really
or
big one.
No. So if an app doesn't support the dual screen nature, give it a second. Essentially what you would have is everything would be in what's called like the extended canvas pattern. So you can see what would happen is if you go from one screen to dual screen, they'll just kind of stretch out.
Okay.
And so kind of go into like a widescreen mode, if you will.
This use case is really amazing with the menu because we've been doing a lot of ordering takeout with cell phones, and the experience of going back and forth between different sections or pages of an app or a website is it's murder trying to get something ordered. I ordered some pizzas the other day at the pool, and I think I had to make like 35 or 36 decisions just to get 2 pizzas to show up. And
yeah,
it would have been much nicer to have a layout like this where I could kind of read on one side and do work on the other side.
Exactly, right. And that is one thing, when you're designing these 2-screen applications, it really adds a unique aspect that wasn't there before, right? You can really decide how you want these 2 screens to work on an application instead of just having them stack on top of each other, right? Choose what's left, what's right, and how you want your application to be, rather than just like, oh, we clicked on, location, let's go to the menu, let's go here and there. And then if I want to switch locations, I have to go all the way back.
Will this support something like, let's say you have like a file management on one window and your app on the other? Will you be able to like drag elements from one app to the next?
Not that I'm aware of at the moment. Craig might be able to speak more to that, but they are. Are you talking about same application or 2 different applications? I guess I should really ask.
I mean, it could be in both cases. Like maybe you can have it on the same application, but you could also like, it would be very interesting if you could do it in 2 applications, like one file management manager and like, a website, like you do on like a read.
Absolutely. So one of the things I didn't mention, but Android's had drag and drop for a little while, even inter-app. but it didn't make a lot of sense on phones where you can only have one app open at a time. But it's built in, it's there in Android, and absolutely supported on the Duo. So you can drag and drop across apps between one screen and the other. It's really smart when you're drag and dropping, even if your kind of finger goes across the hinge area, it knows what you're trying to do. So you can drag files, you can drag PDFs, you can, depending on what your application supports, the type of data that it can receive as a drop target. But it's there, it's built into Android, and it's a feature we're encouraging developers to implement when they're looking at what an app can really do, what it can offer on two screens.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do with like these big screens. Like for example, if you're using like an iPad, that's something that you do quite often. Like you just put it on portrait mode, you have two big apps, and just dragging stuff around, or just copying from one thing and pasting on the other.
Yeah.
So is this, we're looking at, I'm assuming this is like a special AVD that we download from like what you said earlier, like Microsoft, you provide this essentially? Yes. Okay. Yes. And then from a development aspect, what are like my specific triggers to say like I support these modes, or how to handle them? Is this like a React Native like plugin you built? Is this now like going to be built into React Native itself? Like what do if I've got an existing React Native app, like what is my step of like how do I enable these sort of new modes?
Yeah, so for that, I would check out, we have a repo called React Native DualScreen, and it supports 3 different NPM packages at the moment. So the first one is going to be DualScreen Info, and DualScreen Info has a lot of what is like the Titanic would be the DualScreen Info supports a lot of like the business data, right? So what are your screen sizes? Are we currently on, one pane or 2 pane mode, or 1 screen or 2 screen mode, right? What do you want to trigger? It has a action for you. What do you want to trigger when we go to multi-screen device mode, right? And so DualScreen Info is kind of like a nice base package to where you can get all your device information and then really build from there. After that, there's going to be a package called 2-pane view, and 2-pane view is kind of like almost like a base component, if you will. We kind of already built it out, so it automatically handle all this for you, and you can just build your application on top of it. And then lastly, what this is the example app for is a package called 2-pane navigation. And this is really a full-on front-end library or framework, if you will, that comes with a whole plethora of different methods and API calls that you can use to make your app go from, single screen to dual screen. And if you're familiar with anything like, traditional React Native, it's very common to use a package called like React Navigation, right? And if you're familiar with that package and kind of how that works, it should be a very simple adaptation.
Gotcha. And then my other question, kind of related, is I'm curious how much of what I'm seeing here is built into Android, and how much here is like specific Surface Duo magic that's making just even the dual screen experience possible.
Yeah. So there's kind of 2 parts to that. The first one is, we needed to ship the Surface Duo. So what you're seeing at the moment is a Microsoft SDK. The link that I mentioned earlier, docs.microsoft.com/dualscreen, you can download, or you can find the details of a Maven repo to download the SDK. And it's a jar file that allows you to get, as Kyle was saying, like dual screen information about the screens and the hinge and the dimensions, so that you can tell, is the app spanned, is it on one screen, etc. So at the moment, that's a Microsoft SDK that we're shipping, that customers can include. It's production ready. And it's included in the React Native dual screen repo, so that React Native devs can build on top of it. And it's also available for Java devs and Kotlin devs, etc., etc. But Google is absolutely building dual screen capability into Android. It's been around for a while. They just kind of released more information in the videos leading up to the Android 11 release. So if you search for Jetpack Window Manager, it's currently in alpha, but there is a package you can download. And that is kind of the long-term future for this dual screen support. We already have support for that in the Surface Duo SDK in preview. But ultimately, you will retarget all of this stuff to sit on top of the Google implementation of Hinge and Fold. and other devices from us or from other manufacturers that come out that have 2 screens and kind of this form factor, the work you do for your React Native apps today will ultimately, fit into those other devices and form factors as well. So we don't want this dual screen hinge stuff to be Microsoft specific, and Google is on the path to make that part of Android X.
Yeah,
The joys of open source.
Yeah, indeed, and all of that code is open source. Yeah,
that's the most interesting thing. Like, if you're using all this time and effort into building your application to make it so usable, like you can see here, like the possibilities are completely new. You really want it to be able to do the same thing on other devices that have similar capabilities.
Yeah,
like it would be cool even to have the same on something like a tablet, for example. Like you could have a tablet that is the same app but it divides into 2. Like that's something that I don't think I ever seen, and I can see these enabling that in the future.
I do have one quick question. As you switch back to the single pane mode, it looked like, or I guess first question is, do you have to do any special configuration to handle the page navigation when you go to split into the 2 views? Because it looked like you had the one list on the left side, and then the right side you entered a menu and you had the back button in the top left. Do you have to do anything from the developer side to say this tab needs to be, or this pane has to have this kind of
It's handled by
the
with 2 pane
themselves?
navigation package in particular. It's handled by that. All there really is you have a 1 pane and a 2 pane, and you go add 1 pane, add 2 pane, and then you can mark if, I want this one to go to left, I want this one to go to the right, and make it flexible or not. Really, we tried to make it as flexible as possible for the developers, so that way you don't have to spend so much time trying to fight it, right? It's supposed to be as easy as possible. So in that example, all that is there's something called an auto pane. So what that is in the background on this library is if I'm in 1 pane or 2 pane mode, automatically add it to right or left, depending on what I want, and then also handle it for you when you move it back and forth. And so I would highly recommend checking out the React Native dual screen repo. Check out some of that code. Check out the example app. The README is I'm gonna say it's quite good because I wrote it. So it's absolutely flawless. Telling you. But check that out. The goal really was to make it as simple as possible, so that way you don't have to fight it like that.
Cool. I think TJ asked a question that is very interesting. Like I was watching a review for the Samsung Fold, and I know that, for example, they really had to fight on Android on a lot of things, especially with all the window arrangements. Did you guys have to fight a lot with Android, for example, on like the SDK level, to get to this level where it feels intuitive to the user and to the developer?
Craig, I think you're on mute again.
Yeah, trying to be a good video system. I don't know that fight is the right word. Android has a lot of window management stuff added in the past few releases to kind of make this possible, in terms of having multi-windows and multi-on resume, so that multiple activities can actually be at the front. So the foundations were already there. I think for us it was more about finding the right user experience. So the pill bar at the bottom there that we drag to shift across screens or to span into dual screens, and the shadow that appears when you move it so that you can tell you're going to the other screen or it's going to fill up both. I think that was more of a challenge to make it make sense for the user as they're doing it. And then, obviously building on top of the foundations that Google has made to enable multi-window support, enable having multiple resumed apps and so on. So it's been a lot of work, but it's been done in partnership with Google, and not in spite of them.
If you had to fight like any performance battles for having multiple apps running at the same time, especially apps that maybe aren't optimized for this sort of thing, or are like modern devices just in general pretty capable of handling that sort of thing? Yeah,
certainly nothing that I'm aware of. I mean, the device is a pretty well spec'd. We've been using it a lot. one of the things, actually you can see on the site, if you go to Microsoft.com and search for Surface Duo, you'll see all of the apps that are included. And, it has all of the Office apps, all of the Google apps, and you can add, like I said, anything from Google Play. So a lot of people have been using it with two apps side by side. And trying to think if there's anything related. But yeah, I don't really have any anecdotes other than, and I guess, their devices are in Best Buy and AT&T right now. You can like rock on up there and give it a try.
Gotcha.
I know a few people that are headed that way tomorrow. The ability to have two apps up really changed my workflow on my desktop device or my laptop device. My monitor will segment, and I can segment it almost any way I want. And the ability to do work is really changed from a business perspective. I'm not sure if it's changed as much on the consumer perspective, but this new capability almost feels like that kind of shift where a device that's intended for mobile can be thought of as a serious work device now, because you can, so much of what we do in business is take data out of one application and then stick it into another one after some context or whatever we do. And this really eases that workflow.
Yeah, agreed.
Just a question. It looks like Microsoft is really excited about React Native. I know we had the React Native for Windows and Mac OS folks on recently, and you're doing what you're doing here with the Surface Duo. Can you talk a little bit about Microsoft and why React Native is kind of bubbled up to being important?
Kyle, I watched Kiki's interview with you all a few weeks ago. I think she started off kind of explaining it, but Kyle, you're probably better to do the background.
Yeah, well, sure. So, the reason why React Native, is becoming such on the forefront is, one, it's familiarity with people who are actual React devs, right? It's kind of a easy transition to go to mobile devices with that. But two, as well, this is going to be a great example, is when you make something on React Native, it could be a lot more intuitive, and there's a lot of packages and community around it, and the community is definitely a forefront for any type of developer, right? In addition, with the React Native Windows now, if you just make one device on, one application React Native on one device, put in what Kiki showed off with React Native Windows, it can now go to all the devices, right? And so it's more of just, seeing where the community is, and then really showing off and making sure they have the right tools to do their jobs, so that way they can build apps in whatever way they want.
Yeah, it's impressive, just the fact that you can use React Native just about anywhere that's relevant, and Microsoft is a big part of that. Where does that leave things like React XP?
I cannot answer that.
What is React XP?
It's a similar project sort of that Microsoft had for a while. I'm not sure of the state of it. Greg, can you explain it a little better than I can?
No, that's not something I was involved in either.
So many projects, so little time.
That's right.
I think you guys touched an interesting point. Like, what would happen if, I don't know, let's say I'm Instagram, and I think they are React Native. I don't know, let's ignore it. Let's say that they're not. And I want to have all these capabilities that you guys built into React Native Duo. How would you go about it? Like, is there another way to get there that is not super cumbersome? Like, do you guys have something else that is not React Native?
Yeah, so our goal, as I mentioned at the start, I'm very interested actually in all of the cross-platform tools that can target Android and therefore can target Surface Duo. So our goal is to provide a layered set of tools so that anyone on any of the cross-platform tool chains can target Duo with their Android apps. So the minimum thing we've got is the SDK that I mentioned, which is currently just a jar file. And you can put that, in pretty much any tool that can target Android. React Native, you can bind natively in Xamarin, you can bind to it natively, and then expose, the features that it provides in terms of screen telemetry up into whatever operating system, whatever language you're using, whether it's C# or TypeScript or JavaScript. In Unity, you can bring in a native component and expose that into Unity game code. So we're providing that SDK so that you can surface that in any of your tool chains that you might be using. And then in the longer term, obviously, as I mentioned, it'll be Android X Jetpack Window Manager. You can bring that into your cross-platform tool chains as well. And then on top of that, we're trying to offer this additional support. So Kyle listed the dual screen info and two-pane view, and then the two-pane navigation that he's just been working on and showed us. So we're trying to provide those additional layers of support. So if you want to build it all yourself with just the telemetry, the XY coordinates of the hinge and the status of the window, you can build it off on our little SDK. If you want to have a lot of stuff done for you and take advantage of the dual screen, but have it like automatically adapt to one screen with not too much work, then we're providing this two-pane view control. And we're trying to do that across multiple platforms so that we can welcome in React Native devs, Xamarin devs, Unity devs, Flutter devs.
The other question I have, I'm curious, because I'm sure there's a lot of React developers out there that are watching this or are going to see this, come familiar with these APIs. If there's but they're going to have to balance doing some of this work against their roadmap and everything else they have going on. Is there, what is your sort of pragmatic approach by that for implementing this? And I guess what I mean is, are there certain apps that are better suited to this dual sorted thing, like certain activities that you might want to do? And then also, are there certain APIs that you think this is the most important thing? You definitely want to do this. This is going to make your users' lives easier, that sort of thing.
I think for developers that are interested in tackling this, one of the things to check out, I've mentioned the doc site a few times, but we are trying to make that a resource that helps people get started. We talk about some of the user interface patterns that we think are going to be common in dual screen devices. So like a reading view where you've actually got content that's related and you're paging through it. List detail, which is very common in hierarchical data apps and even menu apps like the one in this demo. An expanded view like the map, where you literally just want to have all of the screen for scrolling around. And that also makes sense for something like Excel, like a spreadsheet. You actually want all the cells, right? As many cells as you can so that you can pan around. So we talk about some of those patterns in the docs to kind of give people a trigger or a hint. Oh yeah, that might be applicable to how my app works. And this is the pattern that I want to implement. And then, like I said, we try and provide these controls like two-pane view to help you get there without having to do a lot of work that is, Duo specific. So we try and provide controls like the two-pane view that, will support your app on a single screen. And when the second screen's available, it's kind of lights up for that as well. Because we understand, you're on a roadmap. You can't necessarily devote 100% of your dev resources for some time to target this device. But if it's an incremental change and we're providing these controls and packages that kind of make it a high level decision, hopefully we can encourage people to get on board. And the promise of additional devices from other manufacturers potentially, or there's other folding devices on the market already. The thinking you put into this can apply to those as well. So we're trying to think of it as, just think about stuff with dual screen in mind, and your market's going to expand, and it's a lot of fun.
Does the OS provide any hints that hey, this is an app that put some work into implementing these APIs? Because what I'm wondering is, from a user's perspective, I'm going to open up day one. There's going to be no apps not by Microsoft or Google pretty much that support this, right? So how will I know as a user, oh, this list app, I can do this drag thing so that the details pop over here and it'll be a lot nicer? Does the OS hint at that, or is it going to have to be a wait until enough of these apps start to do it for the users to sort of become accustomed to it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think, like I mentioned, Google's working on the Jetpack Window Manager. So they're working on having support on their side for dual screen. And I think that's probably a prerequisite to anything more being in the operating system or in Google Play Store. So I really can't comment on that because, that's Google. Certainly from our side, we've had this SDK available since March. And we've been, we've been writing documentation and samples and kind of encouraging, any developer that will listen to give it a try and consider enhancing their apps for dual screen. So, when the device is available tomorrow, there will be some apps, not by Microsoft that are highlighted and able to be used and adapt to the dual screen. So you will see those, but I think, it really needs to be in people's hands to encourage, more developers to get interested in that. So, we're looking forward to it being in the market and seeing that excitement and having people think, oh, now I know what I need to do to enhance my app. It's obvious now that I'm holding the thing that we need to be able to do this. So,
but is it possible where you could offer maybe some educated guesses and how much of an app would need to change to support dual screens? And I'm sure it's app dependent and there's lots of wiggle room, but for the folks out there that are wondering, when and how to take this on, is it 2% of the app? Is it 20%? Is it 200%?
Kyle, do you have any ballparks?
Yeah, so I think that's going to be.
We want a specific number. Like I know, I want the number of hours it's going to take me to do this, or I'm just not interested here.
Well,
That's right.
1%.
That's right. That's right. To be honest, I think it really depends on, as a developer of the app, how much time do you want to invest in supporting the dual screens? If you want, you can just not do a thing and it'll just work, right? And you just have one, the one screen, you go to two screens, it's like an extra wide mode, right? But if you really want to take advantage of the multiple screens, that's really going to come down to how do you want to design it, right? And then once that design comes through, making sure that that's exactly what you want, and then adding these different tools and libraries and packages like we have to make sure that it hits that. Luckily, if your app is already built in React Native or any other of these supported languages, you've already done a bulk of the work, right? And so you just kind of need to figure out how to extend that to the dual screen phone. But I think most of the challenge for this isn't going to really be on the development side, but rather the design side and how you want to lay out and structure your app for these phones to make sure it's an actual dual screen experience, right? I think that's going to be the most important.
If you have the application that's not sort of tuned for being on a dual screen and it is on a dual screen, what is the hinge? Is that a dead area? Is there content there that's being hidden? Is the content being split left and right?
Yeah, so the content's being hidden. We have the dimensions in the docs to help you out, but it's like an 84 pixel wide, I guess, black area. You can see it represented on the emulator that Kyle's sharing. Mm-hmm. So there will be content occluded, like that you're showing, controls or whatever. And so part of the API, if you're using these two pane packages that Kyle's showing, they will move your controls to the side of the hinge, laid out text boxes and buttons and so on. But something like the map that's shown here is just flowing under, and you need to kind of pan around a bit if you want to see behind it.
That's totally
that's pretty interesting. So I thought they were going to behave like two different screens, and then you had like kind of two apps sort of thing running. So it's actually like just one big screen, and everything just flows, and you need to kind of be aware that, hey, this content is just not going to be seen by the user.
That's exactly right.
Okay, that's pretty interesting.
One of the articles that I read to prep for this just talked about the focus on making a super thin, well-balanced, symmetrical device. Were you part of any of those discussions, and can you shed any light in how that went and any of the trade-offs that had to be made? It looks like you focused on a great device here. I'm just wanting to dig up a little human interest story if you've got it.
Oh, yeah, no, I wish I was around and able to talk about that. I joined the team in March. I was at Microsoft before, working on cross-platform mobile tools in Xamarin. So I came over to look at, I had a background in all of the cross-platform development areas. So I came over to help with that. So I missed out on some of that good early stuff. But, the genesis of the product is, the Microsoft Courier prototype / whatever it was that was demonstrated, and there's YouTube videos if you search for Microsoft Courier from years ago. So the concept and the way that people wanted it to work, I think, is something that's been in the public domain and been talked about for a while. So honing that down into this two super thin screens and the hinge mechanism and just the way it feels, and like you said, that it's balanced, stuff like that. Obviously, there was a lot of design and engineering that went into it, but I missed out.
Yeah, I checked on your background as part of research as well. And if there was a prize for funniest LinkedIn profile, I would certainly give it to you. I think some of your job descriptions were just ace. Me and my wife had a good cackle about it.
It's all worth it.
I do want to encourage people in chat, if you have any questions, to go ahead and chime in, and I can ask Kyle and Craig. And we had a good one come in. I know we're focusing on the React Native angle of this, but we have a lot of React and web developer people in here. So I'm actually curious, like, what happens on the web in the browser? Like, is there a way of detecting this is a dual screen device? Are you gonna like I'm assuming the browser has a way of going like widescreen. Is that just basically going to act like a tablet mode by default, or how is that going to work for web developers?
I am so glad this question came up. This is something I've been waiting for a long time, and I'm super excited by it. And I literally just blogged about it on our developer blog last Thursday, because it's something we've been wanting to release for a while. So on the device, so on the Surface Duo, Edge is dual screen aware. So there are both JavaScript and media queries available to help you figure out, where the hinge is. And the CSS is really nice to use because it just provides you with fold left, fold top, and you can just, align stuff to either side of the hinge with the media query. It differs between if the device is vertical, so like that or like that. And you can just have these media queries that only apply in those situations. So you can very easily build a responsive layout that shifts stuff to either side for dual screens in Edge with just CSS. And the JavaScript API is similar to the dual screen info that native developers use. It gives you the dimensions of the two panes, and then you can use JavaScript to figure out where stuff needs to move either side of the hinge if that's what you want to do with your layout. But the really cool thing is Microsoft's been working on this API with W3C. So it's actually upstreamed into Chromium, and the actual way that it works, so the dual screen capability, is available in desktop dev tools. So if you've got the current Canary of Edge or of Chrome, and you go into dev tools, you can already pick Surface Duo as a device that you're simulating, and you can enable one of the experiments that includes the dual screen support, and you can try out these CSS media queries and the JavaScript API in your desktop, building like a dual screen web app like today, and then knowing you'll be able to deploy it to the Surface Duo when it comes out. So all of that support is currently in preview, but it works on the device, it works on the desktop dev tools, and all the details are in our blog and in our docs. But we definitely see a future for dual screen web apps, particularly because we're upstreaming it into Chromium. We have the support of the standards bodies, assuming it all gets approved. And, we expect that, like we talked about with other devices, this dual screen web support would appear more in the rest of the ecosystem as well.
Yeah, there's a consistent push here for being open and all playing off the same sheet of music. It sounds like this was a big concern, and you put a lot of effort into it. I was just going in my head what the launch plan looked like, and you have all these, trails that lead to the W3C and Chromium and all these things. Like, I don't know what that spreadsheet looked like, but I'm sure whoever did it deserves a good night of sleep. Yeah,
the Edge team have done a really great job. And actually, it's not just all Microsoft. Like the dual screen proposal that went through W3C has been contributed to by a number of companies. So it wasn't just Microsoft. It really wanted to be an open process. I mean, it has to be. And, that committee takes time, and, it makes the spec and it makes the ultimate product better by having that external review and agreement. So it's still working its way through, but you can use it today. And, there's more details in the docs, and I'd also love to answer questions if people tweet me about it.
They will.
So, yeah, segueing a little bit into this. Sorry?
Go ahead.
Okay. So we're doing like a lot of like discussions around Android, but I'm interested if I have an app, a React Native app that's targeting both iOS and Android, are there any particular things that I need to be aware of if I go to implement dual screen stuff? Would it still just work on iOS, or are there some other things that I would have to be aware of?
So for iOS, the dual screen info supports both, though particularly it is built using Xamarin, right? And so Android, and so also iOS doesn't have any dual screen devices at the moment, so I can't speak to all of that. But they're different packages, right? So as long as you update the Android manifest file with the proper extensions of what you need for dual screen info, there should be no problem.
Yeah, and we were just got a Twitch raid from Code Rush. So thank you very much, and thanks everybody for joining us. We're talking with Kyle and Craig from Microsoft from the Surface Duo team about React Native and dual screen devices. And I know we did have a questions earlier. The web API that's in Chromium is it Windows Segments API? Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, if you want to Google that, Windows Segments API, if you're developing for these devices for the web.
Yeah, or the CSS media spanning query.
Yeah. As a front-end developer, I think that's very exciting. Like I can imagine, like the web is very flexible, and like doing this type of things doesn't require as much work in my mind. Like, you can just, okay, I just want to have, like, for example, in React, let's say, I just want to have this new component on this other screen, and that's it. Like you could literally have a website that is Duo friendly in like a day. Like, okay, I want a component, I want a page that is always here. Or like I can imagine it being very web friendly, and like that's very exciting.
Yeah, I think front end developers kind of got their head around this a lot sooner than native, because responsive design and your need to adjust, you were ahead of the curve in that perspective. And I think, in many ways, adding this capability with CSS to your existing apps, if assuming you've got components and everything's kind of logical, is going to be a smaller step, because it's just another form of responsive.
Exactly.
Yeah, and particularly with this React Native library, it was really important that you don't have to duplicate components. You can just make the one component and just move it around, right? And so that way you don't have to worry about to make the process to getting to dual screen development a lot simpler.
All right, so we got about 15, 20-ish minutes left at this point. So if you have any more questions for chat, from chat for Kyle and Craig, please get those in so I can ask them. But I know one thing that I want, this is probably the last big question on my list, but I'm curious, as you've sort of played around with this device, like I know in my head, this is one of those technologies that I'm not sure, is this going to be the next cool thing, or is this just going to be a complete flop, right? Because it's very innovative, but sometimes these innovative things are really great and people use them, and sometimes like they go nowhere, right? And I think this is a question that all developers are going to be thinking about, because if it is going to be a big thing, you kind of want to ride the hype train, be an early adopter and such. But if it's not going to take off, you kind of want to ignore it altogether. So as you've been experimenting with this, and I realize some of this is going to be like you're members of the device team, so you're fans of it. But like, do you think this is cool? Like, is this like, do you find yourself like going like, oh, I want to do this, and like finding it intuitive and like actually makes you like more productive and more happy as you test these apps and these devices?
So I'm not sure if I can give too much of a review, because we do have this kind of deadline embargo for tomorrow. But, I will say that, we're using the device every day. We're building apps and testing apps, and, trying to find ways to communicate, like I mentioned, the common patterns that developers are going to find and help other developers to take advantage of it. And it does have that, like, you're doing something that you couldn't do before. And I think Dan kind of summarized it a bit when he was talking about, having two screens on his desktop to multitask. One of the things that you kind of don't even need to hold the device to kind of intuit is that you can multitask easily, whether it's between two apps, one on each, or within an app that's providing, your ability to do things like we talked about, a menu app where you're building an order, but you don't lose sight of it, while you're navigating the menu. So that concept of multitasking, whether it's within an app or in two different apps, is unlocked by having both, right in front of you, versus, a phone with a single screen where your multitasking consists of copy paste or remembering and, using the app switcher. So, you kind of don't even need to hold it to understand the value of that. I think, you hinted at, it's hard to know whether the market's going to love it and it's going to take off, which is, a valid question or a valid point. But I'm heartened by the other manufacturers getting into the same form factor as well. I think we have a really nice device that, I could show you without using. But, we're not the only ones that think there is value in this, ability to multitask. So that as well as having used it, that gives me kind of hope and inspiration, and hopefully sparks some tech developer ideas in people watching.
Yeah, well, going back to food for a minute, it's the other day I had to get a takeout order going, and the workflow I used was I had the menu open on a website, and then I was trying to take notes in Google Keep of what everyone was saying they wanted, and flipping back and forth between different apps and losing my place and switching to the wrong app. Like, I've sort of agreed that this is going to be a frustrating workflow, and I'm going to like grit my teeth and just bear through it, but it's not great. There are things that mobile devices are just terrible at. And if I have to walk upstairs to get to the computer, I would rather do that than stumble around on a mobile device. And I feel like some of those workflow knots or workflow tension can be solved with this dual screen device. At first, I saw much more use in sort of the business to business market, because obviously you have people that are supposed to be working on their device, the mythical field service person who's, maybe they're doing a survey and taking notes, or maybe it's someone who's, tagging assets, like things like that, where switching from one application to another is just part of the workday. If you can take that out of there, people make less mistakes and they're more productive. So, that was kind of where my head was at first. But the more I keep thinking about food, the more I think that a dual screen device for consumers makes a lot of sense, because there's work I'm avoiding on my mobile because it's painful, and it's painful just because of the device limitations, current device limitations.
Yeah, I was going to say this does a good job, I think, of bridging the gap between desktops and phones without having to worry about the overhead of having an entire mobile desktop experience. You still get the native phone feel without having to, worry about, am I running all of Windows or something like that on here? So it makes it really nice, as opposed to, just being one big screen or one small screen that I can do vertical task management. I think on Android, you can do like a vertical screen split, which it's kind of useful, but then you open up the keyboard and you basically lose the entire app you get on the bottom. And so like having both of these bigger screens is really, really, really nice. And I could definitely see people taking advantage of this in the future.
Yeah, you mentioned the app splitting thing. I mean, I do use that occasionally, but this is my device. And when you get half of that, it's really tiny. And for somebody that's in their mid 40s, tiny text doesn't work anymore.
Actually, like that's a good point that you mentioned. What happens when you have, like, in your app here, if you open a keyboard, how do you manage that? Like, does it open on both? Does it open on one? Can you choose?
Yeah, so I have to go through the React Native experience here, right? But with React Native, you can pretty much it'll just open on whatever whichever side you're writing on, as well as, with React Native, there's very simple components like avoid keyboard view or, scroll view, and you can just handle it to where if the keyboard's up, you just can keep scrolling your app, right? Or keyboard avoid view will push some things up. So it's all very intuitive, and it really doesn't require much effort at all. I can say.
You start with what React Native offers, basically.
Exactly, and I can say I've been developing and playing with this thing for quite a little bit now, and it's as far as the development experience goes, it's been really quite, because I know one of the points you mentioned is it intuitive. It's been really quite intuitive, and as well as when it comes to consumers, once you kind of get your hands on it, kind of like Craig was saying, you'll really kind of see the advantages that it will have, right? Because I know personally, and I know a lot of people who have like a phone, a tablet, this and that, right? Well, this can kind of cut out some of those middlemans, because luckily enough, right? So if you expand it, you have kind of everything that you would need on a normal tablet or even Kindle size, right? You can even go forward and put it all the way one if you want your single normal phone use size. And when you're all done, just close it.
I know we can't show the device on, but would it be possible just to make the screen more focused, TJ, and then let them kind of turn the device 360? I think a lot of people would like to just see what it looks like with the hinge and everything.
Sure. Just trying to find my camera.
Yeah.
And then just all the way fold back.
That is such a small hinge.
When it's folded back like that, what mode is it in? It's obviously single. And then so the bottom screen isn't receiving touch input or isn't reacting to touch input.
Mm-hmm. That's right. what is this?
As unmute there. Surly Dev has another good use case that I run into this a lot, like just like a password manager, right? Like it's like you get a password and then you need to get it, and it's like, oh god, I gotta switch over to the password manager app and then come back, and it's just like this clunky experience that feels totally unnecessary. And then we have one last question that came in here too. Shanksty, I'm pronouncing that right.
Sorry.
Are there any other devices that the package supports right now, or are you looking to support any other devices?
So it's when you look at the package, you'll see there's a config option. Currently, the goal is to expand it to be, you can maybe plug in what devices you're using, right? But at the moment, it's specifically for to work with DualScreen Info and the Surface Duo. But it is written in such a way to where it can easily be expanded out to the multiple devices. And it's really just a matter of, the goal is to make it just a matter of plug it in which device you use.
Any other, like, we're coming up on our time here. Any last questions or topics, things that we haven't brought up yet, things that we think are important to mention before we wrap up?
It looks like Surly Dev has insight into the Microsoft roadmap. We're expecting the Microsoft dodecahedron Duo coming soon. 40 screens of pleasure, whatever you need.
When is the 3-screen model coming? The Surface Trio.
Oh, it's a good name.
Origami. Microsoft Origami.
Yeah, why not?
Fold that and do like different shapes in a pyramid.
It has to make a Transformers sound as it opens.
I don't know if you guys are aware, or like, do you have the info about how long did this take to develop within Microsoft?
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe part of that answer is literally like, the Courier is years and years old. So, as a user concept, it's been around for a long time. And, within that, I guess the past few years, Android's become something that we were interested in, and the hardware has been developed, but I don't know the exact time frame for this specific device. But yeah, it's definitely the user concept is something that's been around.
So the Courier was an early version of this, and the Surface Duo is the shipping official works, has software, and supported by Microsoft version. So for anyone who kind of remembers Courier, and when I just Googled that, the first thing I found was in 2009, which is going back a couple of good minutes. So really, this new Surface Duo kind of is the culmination of all the Courier work.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine this hardware in 2009, when you look at it and hold it. So yeah. The idea was probably not easily implementable back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a good storm, like even Samsung, they have a very different design, very different idea. But at the end of the day, it's kind of the same concept. You want 2 screens in a single device, and the way you get there is different. And like now you guys are going to be battling with like a bunch of other companies to see which concept is the one that people like the most.
Yeah. What I am kind of excited to, this is a little less on the developer side, but games. I'm interested in how like some gaming developers will take advantage of the second screen, because I know it reminded me of a Nintendo DS actually when I first saw it, and I was like, really like having the 2 screens and being able to do stuff and send it over to the other one. So I'm actually kind of excited to see where that goes too.
I would kill for like a retro Donkey Kong, like the old Nintendo handheld. I'd love that. But yeah, I think there is an opportunity, and that's one of the design, the UX patterns that we kind of identified is one screen can be all controls and status and info, and then you have a whole viewport on the other screen, which is your game. So no more obscuring, like in a regular mobile experience, because you've got heaps of room for all of the data, all of the game info.
Do you have any games that are already supported? Like, do you know of any of them?
Minesweeper.
Solitaire should be the device, I think. But I mentioned Unity in the list of platforms that we support. And so I did a little bit of work to make sure that, it is easy to surface our SDK in Unity. So I'm hopeful that we see people taking advantage of that.
And maybe to wrap up, I guess, if people are interested in this, intrigued by this, what would be your single best recommendation for where do you get started? Is it on the Microsoft Docs? Is it with the React Native plugin? Where should people go if they want to tinker with this?
I think the docs, you can easily find where to download the emulator, and that's going to be the first thing that you want so that you can actually experience it. So go to the docs. You can find the emulator there. There is a section specifically for React Native, which will lead you to the open source repo and the npm packages that Kyle's been working on. And to actually use the React Native stuff, like Kyle said, there's the perfect README attached to page navigation. But there is a lot of detail there in how to use it and how to get started. So no joke, find your way there once you've got the emulator set up. And for the web developers and React folks that we kind of touched on, also the docs cover the CSS and JavaScript as well. And for that, you just need the Canary, Edge, or Chrome. And you can get started, because the dev tools have their own simulator built in.
And is this, just to make sure I got the right page, Introduction to Dual Screen Devices on the Microsoft Docs? I just dropped it in the chat. Okay, cool. So yeah, links there in the chat if people want to follow up on that. Well, thanks, guys. I know one thing we'd like to just wrap up with is just a quick thing of any plugs that anybody has related to anything. Dan, you want to kick us off with that?
Sure. We curate the Enterprise React newsletter where fine folks like Jalen on our team find cool articles and submit them. So it's by developers for developers. And that's how we found Craig and Kyle and their great work here. So, if that's your kind of thing, Google it.
Cool. Obed, do you have anything you want to plug?
I don't know. Go read my blog. Follow me on Twitter. That's it.
Sounds good.
Hire me if you need something.
We're going to have you on a future episode. So we'll see.
That's true.
That's true.
So in 2 weeks, you'll see more of me and more about React.
Cool. Jalen, anything you want to plug?
Just reiterating the React newsletter that Dan was mentioning, and then you can follow me on Twitter at BenBashOfficial.
Cool. Craig, how about you?
Surface Duo is on sale tomorrow. Seriously, we'd love it if folks, give the SDK a try, and even more importantly, if they do that, let us know how they find it, what else they'd like to see. Contribute. The code is all open source on GitHub, and we're just looking for engagement with the community and to help people get their apps into the device.
Cool. And Kyle, anything from you?
So I helped out and contributed a lot on the React Native dual screen repo. Please give it a shot. Download, do some. Ask for improvements. Anything I can do to help you guys make more apps on these phones is, kind of what I'm here for, right? I don't have a Twitter. I feel like now I should though.
I don't have a Twitter. Tisk.
But add me on LinkedIn, email me, or GitHub as well. Whatever way you want to contact me, I'll be more than happy to respond and help out any way I can.
Awesome. And the last thing I'll plug is if you enjoyed this at all, we're running an online event on Twitch here at Progress called DevReach. It's a event that typically happens in Bulgaria. We have a big Bulgarian base here at Progress, but as you might imagine, not happening in person this year. So we wanted to try something different. So we're doing it all online, all free, all on Twitch. So if you're interested in that, you can Google DevReach, or I just threw a link in the chat as well. So that's coming up in about a month or so from now. So later in October.
And whenever we can get back into in-person events, totally go to DevReach. It's in a beautiful city and has an amazing set of speakers and content.
Indeed. Well, thanks, guys, one more time. This was awesome. I look forward to looking at this device. I will definitely go to my local Best Buy tomorrow to convince me to at least check this out and see some of the software reviews and stuff like that. So thanks one more time.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thanks, everybody. Again, we do these React Wednesdays every Wednesday, 1 o'clock Eastern. So just tune back in. Thanks.
Ciao.